Hi everybody, we're here today with Tanya Kuehnast, and she's a past president of FHIMA, and we're here to talk to her about the recent cyber attack that everybody experienced on June 27th. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about business continuity planning and what happened to her and her facility on June 27th. So Tanya, what can you tell us about that day?
So I was notified in the morning, as most directors, management would do. They don't react right away when your system's down because you have system outages. You wait 1-2 hours and you start to really contemplate what's going on. When we realized Nuance had sent out the information that there was a Eurovirus, right away we started making plans, making phone calls, trying to get notification out to the clinicians and doctors that the system was down. Our main process at that point was we knew that we had a downtime plan. We had an EMR. The physicians could go in and document using templates. We also had paper, and we had Dragon that the physicians can use to dictate. So we got the communication out that evening. By the next day, we realized that we probably really had a huge problem going on, and we didn't really understand the complexities of it until time started rolling down. We've got a group of executives and leadership together to start making plans. Subsequently, we brought Dragon down. As it was a Nuance product, they were concerned that there was a possibility that would be infected as well. So we did bring Dragon down. So Dragon, which was one of our downtime plans, was then brought down, and we said, okay, we still have paper and we still have the EMR. What we realized in our downtime plan, which was quite interesting, was that even the older physicians forgot how to use paper. So that was kind of a two-part portion of that. And when we went through, we realized subsequently that our downtime plan of going to paper or to the EMR needed to be much more significant than what we had documented. So it wasn't just, okay, we got to get paper. What happens to the paper, the flow of the paper, who is taking the paper to the floors, etc. How is it being scanned in? Where it got complex for us was we have centralized our building, our HIM department off-site. So there was only 1 or 2 individuals at all of our facilities.
Oh my goodness.
So we then had to deploy people out. We had to do a lot of workflows. We then began to realize that not everyone was notified. So even though we thought that the information went out through our IT department to notify everyone within our organization, we realized it was everyone but anyone that fell under the corporate bucket. Well, guess what? HIM falls under the corporate bucket in our facilities, and so do the majority of the clinical leadership, because we fall under corporate and we go throughout the multi-facility, our IDN.
So the clinical staff were left unawares then, right?
To some degree, yes. To some degree, the clinical staff was left unaware as well. But we did make sure the physicians got email to their personal email. But not everyone reads their email either.
Right, yeah.
So physicians were calling, and we rerouted the numbers because we had a 1-800 number that we had set in place, and we made arrangements with Nuance years ago. And that was in case our phone lines went down, they could use that number. Well, some of these physicians still remembered that number, so they were still dictating.
Oh.
So we had no idea at that point what was in the hub. We had to go in and actually do some analytics to see what was the last things that were transcribed and entered into our electronic record.
Yes.
And that gave us some sense of comfort to know that some of the non-priority documentation were the last ones to go in. So we knew that H&Ps, operative reports, consults, and those type of documents were already through, so they were probably fairly caught up when we went down.
Yeah.
But it was the 1-800 number that we had no sense of whether or not physicians or clinicians were dictating using that number.
What about your stat reports, like your radiology reports, and even some of your path reports, like if they're taking out tissue in the OR, sometimes they send it out and it gets, well, they call it up there, I suppose, take out the tumor or whatever it is, But some of those reports are stat reports, like radiology and things like that. How were those processed?
So radiology was not impacted.
Oh, that's good.
It was our pathology that was impacted because they were also utilizing description voice, and not for the transcription portion of it, but for the dictation portion of it.
Yeah.
So that's where it got very interesting for us. We have subsequently learned that what we have done with eScription and thought we were innovative at the time or just being efficient. We learned that there were a lot of things that we've done over the years, some unbeknownst to us from HIM perspective, that different departments were either using data that was coming out of eScription for their day-to-day processing, to make patient care decisions. So that was one item. And two was, we also found out our cardiology department had used two applications, HeartLab and Lumetics, and instead of doing an interface straight into our EMR, they went through eScription as an unmaintained interface into our EMR. And that quickly came to a halt because when we said go back to paper, it's a template document system, both those systems,
and it's
they were
integrated.
Yes. So it was a couple days until we found out that that was an issue, but we had no idea from an HIM standpoint that that was actually happening in the past. So a lot of workflows, we were able to get up and running within 2 days with another vendor with dictation and transcription services. And we are fortunate in that regards. That was wonderful. There was no interfaces. We were still on a non-robust system, but it was capturing the information we needed for patient care. The other departments that were utilizing the system, our information that was coming out of eScription was what really caused a lot of the workflow and a lot of the issues that arose subsequent to us going down.
Yeah.
So we learned a lot of things, and hopefully we can take that back and make some positive changes within the organization. For example, we shouldn't be using a system, a transcription or dictation system. It should be pure. It should be used for dictation and transcription only. All the things that we've utilized it for what we quoted innovative concepts are now being looked at and revised and coming up with different ways.
I'm sure at the time it was thought to be more efficient. Here, it's already been captured. We'll just import it over to our system or interface with our system, and not realizing the full impact if that system were to go down. Because there was no backup plans for them. Let me ask you a question. I'm interested because usually when you're doing contract work and to get something through legal department usually takes a while. How did you do an emergency contract? It was an emergency contract through your legal department, or how did that work?
Actually, we utilized that vendor for transcription services. So for us,
they were already on board.
They were already on board for transcription. We did an emergency amendment.
Yeah.
And since, from the CEO on down, this was a critical event for us, a sentinel event. We literally were able to get something within a day. Through legal and pass through and a signature.
Now, what staff did you have to reassign staff, or did you have to hire new staff, or how did you work when you said process flow changes?
Yes.
What did you have to shift around FTE wise and people wise?
So from a leadership perspective, it was all hands on deck unless it was something critical from a patient care standpoint, or we had joint commission if they were to come, etc. Everyone was all hands on deck. This conference room was utilized every day from morning till evening. We were on conference calls throughout the day doing workflows, IT, clinical departments, and for us it was I would say almost 4.5 weeks. We were in here workflowing things out, paper, even going from having everything interface into your EMR and throughout in your legal medical record. A lot of things changed, so we had to employ staff out to the hospitals, to our medical group, really throughout our IDN. As far as some of the different things that we did, most of it was when we went to paper from transcription, it was, okay, how do we get this paper to the floors? And so we had to actually go through, we changed, since we outsourced our transcription department less than a year ago, we had no more transcription staff. So we have leadership and we have quality auditors. Those quality auditors who worked at home were brought back in-house, mandated to be brought back in-house, and it was all hands on deck. So we then deployed staff. We had people charting on the floors, paper, and what we realized too was going back to the old days and charting on the floors, there's a delay. Whereas today we're such an instantaneous environment that people are used to seeing it. It's being transcribed and it goes right into the system. Mm-hmm. Now they're waiting for someone to for it to print out, and it prints out in batches. They're waiting for it to print out in our flagship hospital, it's literally a half a mile from one end to the next. Multiply that by the number of floors, and it could take people quite a bit of time by the time they came back to get another batch to go back to the floors. So we did delay care. Obviously there was some kind of checks and balances that need to be put in place. So there was a lot of workflow that we had to go back to, and that's, I think, the other lesson learned was, again, we couldn't say our downtime plan was paper, or go to electronic record, or use templates. You really needed to have a more robust plan than we had in place.
Yeah, and let me ask another question. Because of the delay you talked about, getting it back to paper and getting to the right spot, did that impact your coding, and did your DNFB suffer for that, and what impact did it have on that whole revenue cycle?
It absolutely did. So my main concern when I heard Eurovirus was delay in patient care and delay in discharges. I was concerned. I also was concerned about our DNFB, but to me that was secondary to the patient safety. So yeah, it definitely did impact our DNFB, and we did it as good as a job as we could. We obviously coding reports through HIM, and we have a very good relationship with our leadership, and they were able to tag things that they needed right away for coding, and we were able to prioritize where we needed to.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So you talked about the plan that you had in place, and in hindsight, what teaching moments can you give to HIM professionals that are in the field, and even the students that are coming up in the field today, and lessons to be learned that you learned on this plan that you had in place, and where are you going at with your new plan? I assume you're working on a new plan or plans or whatever. What can you tell us about that?
Well, first and foremost, our downtime plan, again, needed to be more robust than it was, taking it further with workflows of what happens when the system goes down, at what time should you notify. We're organizationally, we are doing a root cause analysis to understand the length of time of notification even throughout our organization, and who needs to be notified, and do we activate a command center with the executive team instantaneously, so that we have further movement, everyone's got a flow going, and we can deal with problems as they arise. So that's number one. Number two, again, taking our downtime plan further out of paper and templates, even for, I would say, our younger physicians. Some of them hadn't been trained on Dragon. A lot of our physicians hadn't been trained on Dragon. Some chose have not to use Dragon, and some didn't know how to do the templates within the EMR.
Yeah.
So, but again, the paper was also a shocker to all of us. So the next piece that we had to concentrate on was all the departments that were utilizing the data within that came out of eScription, our transcribed reports, and I think there was more of an impact to our medical group coders in their coding department, because how they utilized the reports and how it fed into their system. Mm-hmm. So from an FTE perspective, that probably was the most invasive is not the correct word, but the most significant impact from FTE perspective for us. So I have now gone back, and I'm really touting that any department for any application, not just if it's a transcription or HIM, that they go back and say, hey, I utilize this data from other applications, and how does it impact my department, and what's our downtime plan for that? Mm-hmm. Because it's interesting how it wasn't, I always used to use the phrase, lack of preparation on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on mine, but even though it wasn't it's still our organization, it wasn't part of our department or our application, it really was, because they were relying on that information whether we were aware or not. Yeah. So that was one thing that I really want to take back and make sure my organization realizes is everyone has to have their downtime plan on every application that they're utilizing. The other piece is going and having drills. We've gotten hit by hurricanes. We've evacuated one of our hospitals 3 times one year. So we do evacuation drills and disaster drills all the time. We have decided as an organization that would be a good idea that we actually do a drill on a Eurovirus. I don't think we could have done that, in retrospect, we couldn't have done it previous to going through this, because I think you almost had to have gone through it to experience, to know what you needed to know from
Yeah.
a lesson learned perspective. So I think now everyone is acutely aware of what we went through this summer, and will be making changes throughout the organization.
How long do
But-
you expect those changes when you're doing your root cause analysis? Do you think it's going to take, how long do you think it's going to take to do the analysis and then start implementing all the changes that you already haven't started doing so already? A year, or from
It depends.
recovery, or 6 months?
I think so, it depends on what portion of the plan. So one of the things I forgot to say is, number one, you should have a redundant system. So for us, we are now working towards having 2 systems up. So not only will we have eScription, we'll have another voice system that we'll be able to rely on. If we go through another issue, we'll be able to flip the switch and go right away, and we won't have patient care delays, etc. So I think number one, that has to be in place. The other thing that we found out, and I told you previously, was all the holes in the Swiss cheese were aligned that day for us. But I think it happened for a reason, for us to really learn from what was happening. To the communication didn't go out to everyone in the organization when we thought it did. We don't have a redundant system. To us, HIM actually being told, call our help desk and have them help you. And of course, my reaction was, why would I call my help desk? It's our application. It's got a Eurovirus. I needed get communication out to everyone and then go through the steps. So what we learned is, even if we would have called the help desk,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have helped us, because we weren't considered a tier 1 application or a critical system application. And that's all come out through our root cause analysis. In order to be on our tier 1 or critical system, you actually have to have a redundant system actually to be on the list. So we've gone through a lot of different scenarios and lessons learned. I think some of them will be quick to make changes. Like the notification probably will be changed within a month. Then the next month we finalized some of the workflow the other day, and I think that will be completed within a month. Some of the other things, such as interfaces for a redundant system, those will take a little bit more time.
A little bit longer, yeah. Well, I think that's the consensus of the other interviews that we've conducted, is to have a redundant system, to have a backup system, to have something so you're not so reliant on the other. And then we got into one of the interviews that we conducted. She said that, I said, well, what could be worse than having the transcription go down, or one of the modules that you manage go down? She said, and she made the statement, I thought, if the whole EMR system goes down. I never thought about that, but if your whole system goes down, and that did
Yes.
happen at one of the hospitals out of state here
Yes.
now, but that did happen, and they had to scrap everything. They lost everything.
That was our big concern, why Dragon was taken down, and there was a lot of controversy internally whether or not we should bring Dragon down.
Yeah.
But since it was in the suite of products, the concern was that if Dragon got hit and it hit our EMR, we would really be in a hole.
Yeah,
At that point.
I think that actually happened to one hospital where they did not take it down. It infected everything, and when I was reading about it, they lost everything. They lost, because this malware that was launched, it came across as a ransomware. It looked like it was a ransomware, but it was a wiper. It's called a wiper. It destroyed data. It didn't encrypt it and hold it for ransom. Okay, we'll give it back to you if you meet our terms. It destroyed the information. So apparently they didn't do things what they needed to do right away, and so their whole system went down. And I was like, oh my gosh, to have a business continuity plan for that and redundant systems for that, does it get that complicated, or does it get that involved where you need a whole redundant system for your entire EMR and all those processes? What are your thoughts?
I think with EMR, you almost have to go to back to paper. I mean, I'm not sure how you would go to a redundant system with EMR. I mean, they're expensive enough, they're complicated, they're customized. I think that would be pretty significant, and I don't think the dollars are there from an organizational standpoint to ever have a replication of your EMR. It's having, your practices in place, making sure your IT security is acutely aware, and having those things in place within your organization. But I think it's also educating the entire organization on things such as receiving emails and appropriate security measures.
Yeah. Well, you know, back in 2012, President Obama at the time signed into law. He made healthcare. He put that as part of the United States critical infrastructure. So that might lend support to your endeavors here at your facility, because we're with the electric grid now, the water supply as critical infrastructure, and healthcare. And now, because of all this cyber attacks that have been going on more recently with the variety of things, it's gotten more and more critical to have this rolled out at each of the facilities.
Our first meeting with our administration, you know, I said this is an exercise in futility. I guarantee this is not going to be the first time, and it's going to, from a healthcare perspective, it's going to continue to happen. So we were really taking it seriously of what we're doing and trying to do the lessons learned and go through the steps. What I found interesting from an HIM perspective is so many people kept touting transcription or traditional dictation transcription as being old school.
Yeah.
You know, we have voice, and so it was interesting how that system went down, and we brought a lot of things almost to its knees. Had we not, you know, taken action quickly, we could have brought the organization down to its knees. So it not being a critical system or a tier 1 application, to me was a very much an eye opener. I think it was an eye opener to our organization, and from an HIM perspective, it showed how we were the hub. You know, we are the hub of the organization. We almost touch every department within healthcare, and I was very proud of my leadership team because they all stepped up to the plate, and they were very much involved from a workflow perspective, and you could tell from an HR professional standpoint that we were the ones at the table that understood how things needed to flow and how things needed to go.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge and your lessons learned and your experience in this, what I'm sure was a very stressful time here. And we'll look forward to learning some more things from you in the future.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Tanya.